I find it interesting that the three best generic lords in the game broadly fall into the same category, which is that of a powerful caster, kind of dragon type lord, basically, right? You take a look at these two, who I would consider in that top three. Certainly the Sorcerer Prophet for Chaos Dwarfs, and the Supreme Sorceress for the Dark Elves. Today we've got classic Dwarfs versus Elves, but in dark fantasy realm with Chaos and Dark, of course. The Demon's Tongue here for the Chaos Dwarfs, and some laborers up front. We've got Blazing Beards, a Bazooka, some Hobgoblin Archers, regular Chaos Warriors, Dwarf Warriors even. Bull Centaur great weapons still exist, quite good if used correctly, but not quite as OP as they once were. Hobgoblin Raider Cavalry as well, and that's it for the Dwarfs. Now for the Elves, Supreme Sorceress, Quad Reaper Bolt Thrower. We got 4 Witch Elves as well, some Bleak Swords, 5 of them, Dark Riders, and more Witch Elves even in the back, with Feral Manticore up in the sky as well. And yeah, the third one, if you're wondering, I would consider definitely is the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, which again, is a powerful Dragon Lord with casting potential and particularly potent melee prowess. The Sorcerer Prophet here up on the Bale Taurus for slamming attacks, massive weapon strength. He has a ranged attack too, just to buff his own weapon strength in case it wasn't OP enough. Lore of Fire to, again, buff his own damage output. Here he's going to throw down a nice Burning Head over these Reaper Bolt Throwers. Doesn't quite do enough damage to rout the crews, but now in the front line, we've pretty much already missed a very bloody engagement as these Witch Elves get blasted out by the Beards of Bazooka, and then also just eliminate hundreds of laborers in a matter of seconds. Now the Chaos Dwarf front line is going to follow up, and on this far side here, Bull Centaur Renders moving in after the Hobgoblins get counter-rushed by Dark Riders and Feral Manticore as well. So just chaos on all sides here. Meanwhile, up in the sky, the Sorcerer Prophet trying to flee away from the Supreme Sorceress, and the Demon's Tongue getting some nice damage in, managing to just destroy one Bleak Sword straight up, but being focused by all 4 Bolt Throwers has taken extremely significant damage already, though the Chaos Dwarf Cavalry is doing their best to try and collapse these Bolt Throwers and save the Iron Demon here. The Demon's Tongue, a little bit of Cascading Fire Cloak to give extra melee defense as it pulls away from the Supreme Sorceress, but of course that's not going to help against the Bolt Thrower fire. The Cavalry have pretty much shut down all except one. The Sorcerer Prophet himself and the Hobgoblin Wolf Raiders move in to finish the job, but unfortunately the damage has been done. As the Iron Demon attempts to escape, it's going to get not hit by Soul Stealer, blown up by something else. I don't know, maybe it did get hit by Soul Stealer for like a couple ticks there. I'm not 100% sure, but it gets blown up regardless with Soul Stealer in a suspiciously close vicinity. And that's going to be the end of the choo-choo. Unfortunately, the Witch Elves also just making mincemeat of this Chaos Dwarf line for the most part. Blazing Beards and some of the other Chaos Dwarf Warriors managing to hold out, but all the auxiliary support units are just absolutely butchered. And these great weapons, of course, going to be extremely effective. Once they manage to clear out all the chaff and support, they just destroy this Feral Manticore. The Sorcerer Prophet himself is certainly a powerful single entity with that Cascading Fire Cloak. Over 600 weapon strength. He's almost 1,000. I mean, I say almost 1,000. He's like 750 value. So hopefully he can get those numbers up a little bit as the battle goes on. But the dragon here taking a little bit of a risky land in the middle of the Blazing Beards, and with the great weapons nearby. They are routed currently, but I guess they could come back from rout, especially with the Hobgoblins here shutting down this Bolt Thrower once again. Credit to the Dark Elf player trying to get their Bolt Throwers back online and firing, despite all this absolute anarchy all over the battlefield. Managed to get a few more shots off there, but Blazing Beards also getting enraged by the Witch Elves. The madness of Cain, not only, of course, making units go out of control, but with Chaos Dwarf units in particular, that high melee defense being debuffed by the madness of Cain is quite good, but Cascading Fire Cloak to help counteract that, and here comes Sorcerer Prophet on the giant burning cow. Yes, it is a thick flying boy. Much thicker than the dragon, to be honest. And so far, just kind of hanging around, making sure these units stay routed. Eventually, we'll probably see a showdown between these two. And in terms of their stats, there's pretty good parity between the two, which means largely it comes down to RNG. Like, basically, these two are interchangeable. There's slight differences here and there, but they should more or less even out over the course of a long battle, which means, yeah, if you were to test this, you know, 1v1 a dozen or let's say even 100 times, you might get wildly different outcomes, but probably the more times you test, the closer it gets to maybe 50-50. I don't know, maybe it's like 55% in favor of the Sorcerer Prophet. I'm not 100% sure. It also probably depends on the context of if they're fighting on the ground or if they're fighting in the air. But of course, those clean 1v1s are rarely how the game actually works. In reality, there's always support units, which in this case, at least temporarily favors the Dark Elves until a Burning Head comes through and just rips through the Witch Elves, makes most of them terror out. There are still a few around, which that Madness of Cain, again, debuffing the melee defense critically, so that the Sorceress has a better chance to hit. You know, more consistent contact, as I like to say, with those melee attacks. But there are still these Bull Centaurs hanging around as well, and of course, there's more fire magic available to the Sorcerer Prophet. Probably has potential for another Burning Head or two. Ooh, Cascading Fire Cloak. Unfortunately, those Bull Centaur renders route literally as soon as it's casted. Might have been better to just self-cast it on the Sorcerer Prophet there, but at the end of the day, see how much of a difference it actually makes. The Supreme Sorceress doesn't look like she's doing much attacks onto the Sorcerer Prophet, and critically, the Vial of Hashut was saved up until this point, which of course is a massive armor debuff, gives additional weakness to fire as well. Yeah, the Sorcerer Prophet manages to get a few hits in while it's up, does lose a decent amount of that uptime, but even still, let's see if he can perhaps bail out these Bull Centaurs, or nope, I was going to say get those Hobgoblin Cavalry back, but I think most units at this point for Chaos Dwarfs are going to want to rout. Just going to be a matter of if the Sorcerer Prophet can carry against all of this. The Dark Elf Infantry is basically non-existent, assuming he has enough for one more Burning Head, just charging in to force a big blob, and especially routing off like these last of these Witch Elves. Probably prove decisive enough, and then it just comes down to the two Lords and their RNG fight against each other. I will say, if the Sorcerer Prophet is able to take advantage of the weakness to fire effects of either Cascading Fire Cloak or, you know, his pistol, if he can manage to get some pistol shots while in melee, that could make a pretty significant difference. And then it gives a huge percentage damage increase to the attacks of the Sorcerer Prophet there. You can see he did fire in melee. It looks like it actually went and hit those Witch Elves instead, though. But again, once he goes onto the ground, line up Burning Head. Even if it doesn't necessarily just destroy the entire unit, the leadership damage should be enough to just finish off quite a few of these units, lead to them shattering. Supreme Sorceress, once again, the dragon's animations kind of bug out, and she actually faces the opposite direction from where she needs to. Takes a few big hits, the leadership goes down significantly. Oof, yeah, that little pistol there also giving that 20% extra weakness to fire. It's just so strong when you, especially when you stack it with other effects, but even just on its own, extra 20% damage is an extra, what, 100 damage here plus? So that is a significant amount of difference. So we'll fast forward a little bit as the Supreme Sorceress runs from the Sorcerer Prophet. All sorts of magical classes here being involved, but there you go. Chaos Dwarfs pull out the win there, and yeah, heavy carry in the late game there from the Baal Taurus Sorcerer Prophet. Just such a powerful mount, having Lore of Fire, just the insane fire synergy makes it a huge force to be reckoned with. For the rest of the build, a lot of units are actually going to struggle to be reasonably cost effective. A lot of things kind of fall just short, like this Bull Centaur is pretty close to where you'd want it to be. The other one's a little bit far off. Blazing Beards do great, as always. The rest of the build kind of is just here. I mean, 200 value on some Goblin Laborers is nice, must be said, but then On the Dark Elf side, the value, it seems, yeah, is maybe a little bit more distributed out. There are a lot of units, like these Witch Elves in particular, with high kill numbers, not necessarily the most value. I mean, this one still manages to get 800 value. 14,000 damage dealt for an infantry unit like this is significant. 15,000 damage dealt on this one. It's blending through that chaff, which is obviously super important to do. And it's interesting to see. I mean, 5 Witch Elves is not something I would have expected to see. But I've been seeing a lot more recently, like, wide DPS infantry, like we saw just a couple days ago. So, you know, 5 Forsaken, now 5 Witch Elves, and I actually kind of like this. I think DPS infantry is a class that's pretty good if you have enough of them. I mean, they're going to take casualties, so if you have only a few, they tend to just die off and not pay for themselves, but in the right situation, they can be very effective, although it's certainly a big risk to take this many. But I think it almost paid off for Rainy Frog here. Ultimately, I think just the dragon not getting the best engagements against the Sorcerer Prophet, maybe using those Soul Stealers a little bit early, a little bit aggressively to try and finish targets off, rather than conserving them for a late game engagement where she might need the HP. Hard to say, but it's definitely an interesting one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.